Hello, friends, and welcome back to the Intuition Activation Podcast. I'm your host, Jessica, a spiritual medium and intuitive coach, and I'm so excited that you're here and joining me for this intuitive development journey. And I really hope that this has been an intuitive development journey for you, where you actually feel as if from listening to the tips and tricks that I've been sharing on this podcast, that maybe you're starting to actually connect to your spirit guides. You're starting to connect to those little hits of intuitive downloads and starting to receive messages from your guides and maybe your higher self, and just feeling more connected to your intuition overall. And this episode is for you if maybe you've done all of the exercises, you've tried the meditations, maybe you've taken my mini course, my intuition activation mini course, and you've just tried all of the things, everything you've heard on this podcast, and you feel like you still haven't connected to your spirit guides. It feels like no answers are coming through. You feel like you've tried all of the tips and tricks, and maybe you're getting a little bit frustrated that maybe you're starting to feel like maybe it's you, maybe you're just not intuitive, maybe you're just not born with that intuitive gift. And I really, really want to dispel this for you today, because if there is anything that I want you to learn from this podcast, is that everybody is intuitive. This is your God-given birthright. We all have an intuition. We are all connected to source, to spirit, and it is your right to be able to connect. The question is, what are you doing wrong, or what mistakes might you be making that's preventing you from accessing this part of yourself that definitely lives within you? And so today, I really want to break down the 5 biggest mistakes that I've seen with my students in both my 12-week program and my private coaching clients, and share with you how you can overcome these hurdles too, so that you can finally start to get real, tangible answers from your guides and feel like you're connected to your intuition. So I'm so excited to dive into this episode. I think it's going to be so helpful for so many of you. So before I do that, before I dive in, I do want to remind you that I still have a couple of spots left for the month of July. So if you do want to have a session with me, connect to your spirit guides, and have me channel those answers for you today or soon, then definitely head over to my website and find your spot. As I said, the month of August is fully booked, starting to get some bookings for September and October. So if you're wanting one sooner than that, definitely head over to my website and get your session for July. All right, so let's dive into today's episodes, the 5 biggest mistakes that I've seen when trying to connect with your intuition. Now, the first one I want to talk about is not knowing how you best connect. So, in other words, not knowing what your strongest clair is. Now, this is a huge problem. If you think that you are going to see a message from your guide, but really your strongest clair is that you're clairvoyant or clairaudient or clairsentient or claircognizant, then you're going to think that you don't have intuitive abilities because you're looking in the wrong place. So the best example I can give is that most people feel like when they connect to their spirit guides, they're going to see an image in front of their mind. They're going to see it the way a clairvoyant does. But if that's not your strong suit and you're looking to see something, but really your guides are connecting to you through physical sensations, or they're dropping information into the back of your mind through clairaudience, or you're downloading it through claircognizance, you're always going to feel like you don't get messages. And so it's really important that you really get clear on and identify which is your strongest clair, which is the way that your guides are most often connecting to you, so you know where to look. And guys, this is really important because and it doesn't mean that you can't connect with the other clairs, right? If you want to be able to see, even if it's not your strongest clair, you will be able to, and it's something that you can reactivate and strengthen. But it's easiest to start by knowing which clair is your strong suit. So as you've heard on this podcast many times, I think I have an ad right at the beginning. that if you don't know what your strongest clair is, then definitely head over to my website on the main homepage and take the quiz. Find out which clair you have that's the strongest one for you. That'll definitely give you a good idea. But I'll give you a very quick rundown here of which one might be yours, okay? Think about how you learn best. If you are a visual learner, then chances are you're probably going to be more likely to see. If you do better with having things be explained to you, then chances are you might be clairaudient or claircognizant. If you're somebody who needs to do things or touch and be involved and have hands-on experiences in order to receive information or to pick up that information, then chances are you're clairsentient. So think about the way that you absorb information easiest and how sort of that worked for you when you're in your school days. And that is going to probably be your best bet of which clair is yours. Your guides are going to try to make it easy for you. They're going to try to present the information for you in a way that you most enjoy receiving the information. If you are not a visual person and you do better with having things be explained to you, and you're looking for the information to come through a vision, then you're really going to think you're not able to connect, when really your guides are sending messages to the back of your mind and sending little whispers and voices in your head, and you're just ignoring them because you're looking so deeply for those images. And vice versa. If you do better with visuals and you're expecting to hear a voice in your head, and then you don't hear that voice, and then you just assume that the images in your head are your own imagination, then you're going to miss it. You're going to think that you can't connect. So it's so important that you identify what your strongest clair is. Now, even once you do identify what your clair is, doesn't mean you can't strengthen it. And so this goes down to doing the simple act of calling in your guides. So taking a few deep breaths, spirits of the light, are you here with me? Then ask them, please reactivate and strengthen either my hearing, seeing, feeling gifts, whichever ones you want to develop. And specifically make sure to include the one that you think you might be strongest in. And that way, your guides can start to turn up the volume on the gifts that you already have. I used to say to my guides, make it so that I can see you and hear you very clearly. I want it to feel like a movie in my head, right? And your guides listen, they want to work with you. They want you to receive those messages. So they will definitely listen when you ask them to do that. And then go ahead and ask them a question and see how it comes through. If you ask them to reactivate and strengthen your seeing gifts, and then you ask a question, start to look for those seeing gifts, for the images to come through, if clairvoyance is your strongest one. So reactivate and strengthen the one that you think is your strongest. And then, of course, you can start to add in the other ones that you would like to have. My suggestion is always to try and have a combination of at least seeing and hearing, if not seeing and knowing, or knowing and hearing, right? Ones where you can actually, where you can get some very clear, tangible information. If you're just getting physical sensations, maybe the message isn't super clear, right? I mean, it's great to get tingles down your spine, but what does that mean for your question? So I always try to encourage you to include at least hearing or seeing in one of the ones that you're trying to strengthen, so that the messages become clearer for you. And then ask your guides to do that. I do want to say that if claircognizance is your strongest, which for a lot of people it is, this is going to be the hardest one to identify. These are the people who always tell me, I don't think I have an intuitive ability, because it's the hardest one to recognize as your strongest one. And go back to the episode, I think I called it the strongest clair of all or something, the strongest intuitive ability. I believe that's the episode name. And this is because this is information that's coming through you, right? It's just coming through you. You don't know how you know something. You just know it lights up your body. It feels like an idea. And this is why you have trouble identifying this as a clair or as a message coming through, because number one, they're coming through so often, but number two, it's not an extrasensory experience. It's not coming from something you hear or see. It's just a knowing. And so if this is your strong suit, ask your guides to reactivate and strengthen it, but then ask them to reactivate and strengthen one of the other ones as well, so that you really know without a shadow of a doubt that you're connecting. And so it's really helpful to know what is your strong one, and then you can sort of go from there and not only develop the one that's your strongest, but also add in the other ones as well as you're starting to connect more and more with your guides. So that's number one, is identifying your strongest Claire. And again, if you're not sure and you need some help, head over to my homepage, jessicarachel.co, and take the quiz. And I can probably help you identify which is the one that is going to be your strongest Claire. So definitely go and do that. Now, number two is release the idea of what you think channeling should look like. If you believe that connecting to your guides is going to be this big, magical, obvious, in-your-face experience, then I'm really sorry to inform you, but you are sorely mistaken. This is not the case. When we are channeling and we are receiving messages from spirit, it is not this big outside of us experience. Chances are you've been receiving messages from spirit your entire life. And now what we're doing is learning to identify those intuitive downloads that you have always and already experienced. It is not going to feel like something outside of yourself or something extremely different from what you have already experienced once in your life. This is why it's so important to recognize which Claire is yours and how those messages come through most commonly. But once you learn to identify those subtle messages that are coming through, this is when you realize that you were already intuitive. And so if you think that you're going to have an apparition, this image of a ghost appear in front of you, or you think you're going to hear a big booming voice inside your head that doesn't sound like your own voice, or you think that it's going to feel like tingles down your whole body so much so that it's electrifying, you're going to think you cannot connect. You are. And so what do you need to do? You really need to just start identifying those experiences that are subtle and within your own body that you have already experienced. When you are experiencing an image from your guides, a message, it feels the same as experiencing your own imagination. What's important is the context. If you have asked your guides and called them in and asked them a question within that container of, I took a few deep breaths, I called in my guides, I asked them to connect, and now I'm asking a question, whatever messages come in through my imagination at that point is a channeled message. It is going to feel like your imagination. It's not going to feel different than your imagination. The question is it within the context of calling in your guides? Now, the same thing is true for clairaudience, and I would argue claircognizance. It's going to feel like thoughts inside your own head. Now, I have mentioned in previous episodes when we talk about clairaudience and claircognizance that there's sometimes a difference where our thoughts tend to be chattery and quick and fast and at the front of our head, and maybe messages from our guides are calm, soothing, and coming from the back of our head or behind us. But it's not necessarily true. Okay, it's usually the case, but it may still feel like your own voice inside your own head, your own thoughts. And the question is it a thought that you had in the context of channeling your guides? And this becomes a little bit more of a feeling of trust, and we're going to talk about trust for sure, and just actually be willing to say out loud the voice or the thoughts inside your own head and trusting that, right? And the sensations that you're going to feel from a guide, they're not going to be brand new sensations that you've never felt before. I can guarantee that almost everybody who's listening to this podcast has most likely felt goosebumps in their life, right? Had goosebumps, had chills, shivers down your spine. The question is, have you actually identified that as your guide sending a message and letting you know, hey, you're experiencing a truth for you in this moment, and that's why you feel chills all over your body? So it is more subtle. It's also more natural. And the beautiful thing about this is that when you do learn to recognize the subtleties, the subtle messages as they're coming through within the context of channeling, within the context of calling in your guides, then you start to realize that, oh, I have been receiving these messages my whole life. And I just didn't know that that's what that was. I thought it was me, right? And so, really, it's just a matter of identifying the experiences you've already had as channeled messages. Okay. Now, number three is the biggest one, and this is trust. This is the biggest barrier that I experience with all of my students is learning to trust that what came through in the context of channeling was actually from spirit and not just their own thoughts inside their own head. Now, this is where a little bit of blind faith has to come in. If you get a message or get some advice from your guides and you're not sure if it was you or your own thoughts, right? The best thing to do is just speak it out loud anyway. Say it out loud, share it with the person that the message came through for, if it is for somebody else, right? Or if it was a message for yourself, you have to just take action on it. Because once you learn, or once you actually kind of take a leap of faith and blindly trust that the thing that came through was channeled, and you actually speak it out loud, or you actually take action on that message that came through, this is where you can start to receive confirmation and trust that it was a channeled message. Because if you share it with a person, let's say you're asking for a message for a friend, and you actually give yourself that, you muster up the courage to share it with them out loud. And then in that moment, they can confirm for you, actually, yes, that means a lot to me, or actually, that makes a lot of sense for me. Well, now you can kind of go, okay, that message that I heard at the back of my head that I dared to actually speak out loud actually helped this person. It must have been a channeled message, right? Or it could, if you're lucky enough, I wouldn't say lucky enough, but if it comes through as a message that there's no way you could have known this about somebody, right? It's a fact that they never told you. And then you speak it out loud and they confirm for you that, yes, that is something that's true for them. That is a fact that you just didn't know. Well, that's instant confirmation. I'll give you an example. So, and this is the most simple example, is if I'm channeling for a client for, the first time, I've never met them before, this is the first time I'm seeing them, and the message comes through at the back of my mind that, what their occupation is, right? I've never asked them, they've never told me, and I kind of go, this may sound kind of crazy, but are you a dancer or are you a librarian? Because that's the message that I heard in the back of my head. And then in that moment they go, yes, actually I am. Well, now I can learn to trust that that voice I heard at the back of my head that said she's a librarian or she's a dancer, whatever it is, I can go, okay, that was me channeling in that moment, because I couldn't have known that message. I couldn't have known that truth about this other person unless I said it out loud and had them confirm it for me as truth. So you have to start sharing it. You have to start speaking it out loud and trusting, or having it prove to you that that message was channeled. Now, it's a little bit harder to do if it's for yourself, because when we're channeling for ourselves, well, we already know all of the details of our own life. And so oftentimes we get tripped up by this and go, well, I could have told myself that, right? This is a truth I already know. Well, trust that when you're asking your guides a question, they're going to reflect back to you the answer that you probably knew you should have gotten, and you are choosing to ignore it. So, for example, maybe you got invited to a party and your initial instinct was, I don't really want to go, right? But then your logic mind comes in and go, oh, but this is a good friend of mine and she came to my party and I should really go, and all of these things. And so now you find yourself kind of stuck going back and forth of, do I, don't I go to this party? So you decide to ask your spirit guides, do I go to this party? I don't know, maybe it's a baby shower or a bridal shower, right? And this person maybe did so much for you and you really feel like you should support them, but everything in your body maybe is screaming not to go. Or maybe it's not screaming not to go, but you kind of aren't sure if you should or shouldn't. Okay, so you ask your guides, do I go to this bridal shower or to this baby shower? And the answer that you get is probably the answer that you expect, which is your guide saying, no, it's not aligned, don't go. Well, now it's going to be hard for you to trust, was that just my own thought because that was initially what I felt? And, it's the thing that I hear, I feel I should be doing, or that I kind of thought already. Well, yes. Okay. Your guide is going to confirm for you your initial gut instinct, and they're going to clear away the chatter of the logic mind that always comes through, right? You're sitting here talking yourself out of the initial reaction that you had, that clairsentient gut feeling that was telling you, no, you don't really want to go to this. But then you kind of let logic and, self-judgment start to come in and cloud that judgment. Your guide is always going to offer you the message that is most aligned for what feels good for you in the moment. So all you can do then is trust that if my guide is telling me not to go, it's because, number one, maybe it's not in my best alignment, but they're also telling you what you really need to hear, which is the truth for you, the truth that you initially felt and are choosing to ignore because you're letting other chatter come in. And the only way you're going to be able to trust that message and trust that it's true for you is actually take action on it by not going to that party and see how you feel. Are you going to feel better if you went? Or you can prove it to yourself the backhanded way and go anyway, ignore the message that you think was from your guide, see how you felt when you went. Are you regretting it? Are you regretting that you went? Should you have listened to that initial gut instinct and that message you thought maybe was the channeled answer from your guide? It will confirm for you whether you take action on what they say to do or whether you choose to do the opposite. But this is how you learn to trust that message that comes through. So trust is the biggest thing. And the only way you can do it is if you kind of have a little bit of blind faith and take action on the thing or speak out loud the thing that you think you thought in that moment, right? And it is going to feel like a thought, okay? But again, it's in the context of calling in your guide, so that is a channeled message. The other thing that I can say is that if you're not sure what is coming through, one of the ways to kind of help bring the messages forward, especially if you're claircognizant, so someone who, you're really not sure if you channel at all, is to just start speaking. If you feel like you're calling in the guides, you're asking a question and it feels like crickets, like I hear nothing, I see nothing, no message is coming through. This is when you have to just start talking or just start writing. So do some automatic writing or just start speaking, stream of consciousness, whatever comes through in that moment, whatever thoughts you think you're having. Even if you believe they're your own thoughts, you have to just sort of kind of let the channel start running. And so if, again, with the example of, do I go to this party tonight? You just start talking. I don't know what I think about it. Part of me really wants to go and part of me really doesn't want to go, but the other part of me is telling me I should, right? Just start talking, because as you start talking, the message will run clear and it will become clearer to you what you should do. Especially if you're claircognizant, always kind of trust that like first yes or no that kind of comes out of your mouth in the moment. So hopefully that's helpful, but trust is sort of the biggest barrier to believing that you have intuitive gifts. And the only way you can get past that idea of trusting, get past that idea of second guessing yourself, is by proving to yourself and receiving confirmation when you take action on the messages that you think came through as thoughts. You have to take action. Either speak them out loud and share them with a person, let them confirm it to you, or take action on the suggestion that was for yourself and let it see that it can serve you, that it served you, and that you're right. You were right to follow that advice. So trust is probably the biggest one. And it takes time to start to trust, but you have to kind of have that little leap of faith at first. Okay, number 4, practice. Practice connecting to your intuition, practice speaking those messages out loud, practice channeling for yourself, practice channeling for other people. As I've mentioned so many times on this podcast, your intuition is like a muscle. If you don't strengthen it, you will not be able to recognize it as clearly. This grows with practice. Now, I want to underline here that it is actually easier to channel messages for somebody else than it is to channel messages for yourself. Why? Because when we're connecting for ourselves, we're connecting to our own guides. Sometimes we get too judgmental of the messages that are for ourselves. It's too easy for us to assume that these are just our own thoughts and our own opinions on our own life because we know too much about the situation. When you are channeling for somebody else, Number one, you're more objective. You're not as attached to the outcome of what the answer is going to be. It doesn't directly affect your life, whether your friend goes to a party or not. It has nothing to do with you. So you have the ability to be more objective. And when you channel for someone else, you can receive immediate confirmation from them if the message you heard, felt, saw is true for them. They can tell you in that moment. And again, the more you receive confirmation, the more you're able to trust your abilities, and the more you're able to identify that thought, that image, that sound, that feeling as a channeled message. And so I always say, if you practice makes progress, but practice on other people. People think it's the other way around, that they have to be really ready and good at channeling for themselves before they can start to channel for other people. With your intuition, it's actually the opposite. It's easier, 10,000 times easier to channel for somebody else than it is to channel for yourself. And I would even argue that me, a spiritual medium, somebody who connects to her guides on a daily basis, who channels for other people all of the time, I still will sometimes seek out my own spiritual medium, so other people to channel for me to get a clearer message, because sometimes we're just too in it. We're too up close to the situation that we're feeling, that we're struggling with and wanting advice from our guides from. So even I have my own mediums that I go and seek out when I need a really clear answer, because sometimes we are so opaque to ourselves. Sometimes it is so easy to second guess ourselves or information that is directly attached to our own life. But when it's inconsequential to us, when it's for somebody else, we can kind of be a little more objective. We can throw it out there and it has no consequence to our life. And more importantly, that person can confirm for you right away whether that message that came through resonates with them or not. And then you'll know that you can trust your intuition even more. So find a group of girlfriends who you feel comfortable practicing with, who are into the woo-woo and who are open to connecting. And even if it's not a group of girlfriends, but just anyone that you feel comfortable with, someone who's not a skeptic, but is open to being channeled for, let them ask you a couple of questions about their life and let you channel, let you practice, let you connect to their spirit guides and see the messages that come through. And finally, the fifth mistake that you could be making when trying to connect to your guides is not being able to relax and surrender. Sometimes we can be way too attached to the outcome of the answer that we are looking for. So, what you might need to do is change your question. Don't white knuckle grip and hold on too tightly to what you think the answer should be or what you want the answer to be. Change your question, change the way you're asking it, or ask something that's less important to you at first. When you have expectations of what you're hoping the answer will be, you're not going to be open to hearing what the answer actually is. So I always tell my students at first, ask a question that you have no preference towards the answer. Ask something completely arbitrary, like, what should I have for dinner tonight? Or ask a question for somebody else where you do not have an attachment to the outcome. When you are attached to the outcome, you're not willing to hear what the answer actually is or should be. So change the question. If it is a question that's personal for you and this is the answer you want, or the answer that you need, then you really have to surrender to the possibility that the answer is not what you're going to be expecting, or surrender to the fact that it's exactly what you always thought and that you didn't make it up. Allow what needs to come through without trying to steer the answers in one direction or the other. And you do just have to let it come through, to allow it in whatever way it needs to come through, even if the answer feels out of left field or unexpected. Now, this happens to me a lot, especially when I'm channeling for clients who I've never met before. And, they'll ask me a question and sometimes I'll have my own thoughts, my own ideas of what I think the answer might be. And then when the answer does come through from spirit, it sometimes totally catches me off guard because it feels so unrelated to what I think the answer was going to be. And then I might judge it or question it. and kind of go, that can't be right. That can't be the answer that the guides are giving. And until I trust myself and speak it out loud anyway, and have the client confirm for me that that answer that they're giving, as out of nowhere as it feels for me, actually makes a lot of sense for them, then I would never learn to trust my intuitive abilities. So you have to just surrender that it may be unexpected. And I'll give an example of this. So let's say a client has asked their guide, what do I do for this business quandary? So maybe they have they're asking me, should I start a podcast or a YouTube channel, right? They're asking something that specific. Do I start a podcast or a YouTube channel? And then the guide, and you think that and you're thinking the guide is going to answer either one or the other. But what if the answer that comes through is the guide says neither, right? Do you trust that and surrender to that answer? Or are you going to go, but you were really hoping that the answer was going to be podcast. And so you're not willing to hear that answer of what neither means, right? So you almost have to lean into it and kind of go, okay, what do you mean by that? Ask your guides to elaborate. Ask them to send another word, send more information. Why neither? Right? And maybe the guide is going to say, you actually do a lot better with the written word, and you should be writing a blog or a Substack or a book or something. And so allow what messages that need to come through, and surrender that it's not going to always be the expected answer. We cannot white knuckle grip or hold on to or steer our guides in the direction of giving you an answer that is not what they believe to be the most aligned truth for you. And honestly, the more we're open to this, the more that we allow our guides to steer us in the direction of knowing who we really are and knowing what's our truth. And if we really, really allow it and we really start to accept it, we start to realize that our guides always have our best interests in mind, and that the information they give us, when it does come through and we allow it and accept it, usually it feels like a big wave of relief washing over you, because it's the message that you all along knew is what felt best for you. You were just allowing judgments or other opinions cloud your judgment. So relaxing and surrendering, although hard to do, can also be so satisfying when you learn to do it. So those are my 5 tips, or the 5 biggest mistakes that you could be making when trying to connect to your spirit guides. So just to recap them really quickly, 1 is not knowing your strongest clair. 2 is releasing the idea of what you think it could or should look like. 3 is not trusting the messages that come through and believing that it's your own thoughts. 4 is not practicing enough. So be sure to practice, practice, practice. And 5, finally, learning to relax and surrender instead of being attached to the outcome that you think is going to come through. So when you do all of these things, or when you stop doing all of these things, the channeling process becomes so much easier. And it is a process. You can't just jump into one of these things and it come through super easily. This is something that takes time, it takes practice, and it takes a little bit of giving yourself some grace. Learning to trust yourself can take time, especially depending on the conditioning that you've been raised with. And if you've always been sort of taught that there is a right or a wrong answer going through life, then this is going to be hard for you. It's going to take some time, but you will get there. So know that once you learn to trust yourself, learn to relax and surrender, everything else will come through clearly, and you will see that those beautiful, subtle intuition downloads, intuitive downloads, have been coming to you your whole life. And now you're going to be even better at identifying them. Now, if you feel like this episode was helpful for you, I really want you to give some of these a try, these tips a try, and let me know. Reach out to me and DM me on Instagram and let me know if this has been helpful for you. But more importantly, all of this information that I talked to you about today is what we really, really hone in on when I work with my students in both my private coaching and my 12-week Intuitive Power Mastery program. Now, I have a little announcement or a teaser that I want to make, which is that my 12-week program is changing. I'm in the process of revamping it, redeveloping it, making it more accessible for more people. And possibly reformatting how it's going to be coming through, but or how we're going to kind of go forward with it. I'm trying to make it as effective for you as possible. I'm trying to make it so that as many people who want to join as possible can, but more importantly, that you really get the results that you're hoping for, which is to be able to connect to your intuition, connect to your spirit guides in a really powerful, meaningful, clear way. And so this is being revamped right now. And if you are even slightly interested about what it might look like to work with me, either in a group program setting or with private one-on-one coaching, please be sure to head over to my website, jessicarachel.co. And if you think that you might want to join the group program that's being revamped, then definitely get yourself on the waiting list there. There's a button on the website that says apply now. There's a little form that you fill out, and this is going to give me a little bit of an idea of where you're at already, but it'll also add you to the waiting list. So when the course is ready to go, when it has been revamped and is totally ready for you to join, you'll be the first to know what's going on. And there may be some bonuses attached to that if you sign up early. So chances are that my goal is for this new revamp program to be launched in the fall. So probably around September, October. You'll definitely know more as I get closer to releasing it and launching it, but definitely fill out that form, get yourself on the wait list. If you're interested in working with me directly on developing and strengthening your intuitive abilities, there's definitely going to be a community component in this program where you have other people to practice on. And so this is what you're craving, right? You feel like you've been trying to do it yourself, but if you could just connect with another group of people or other individuals who are on the same path as you and practice on each other, well, I'm definitely going to be providing that for you in this program once I revamp it and decide what it's going to be called and what it's going to kind of look like going forward. So it is going to be a little bit different than what it's been in the past. Otherwise, if you're wanting to really just get that really close one-on-one attention, I do have a few spots available for my private intuitive coaching practice. And so if you do want to just work directly with me, you can definitely head over to my website and check that out as well and see if that program is best for you too. And then we can really get you going on developing your intuitive abilities and go from there. So I really hope this message or this episode was helpful for you. I look forward to working with you. Definitely be sure to go add yourself to that waiting list, and I will catch you guys in the next episode. Have a beautiful rest of the weekend. Bye, guys.